In December 1943, the Empire of Japan stood at the height of its power across the Pacific. From the jungles of Burma to the beaches of the Solomon Islands, its forces fought fiercely against an enemy it believed it could match, the United States Navy. But behind Japan's strategic confidence lay one of the most catastrophic intelligence failures in modern history. That year, Japanese naval planners estimated that the U.S. Navy possessed approximately 296,000 enlisted men. In reality, the number exceeded 2,034,000, a miscalculation of nearly 8 to 1. It was a blind spot so vast that it shaped every major decision in the Pacific War. This was not a failure of secrecy or lack of access. Japanese intelligence had access to a steady flow of attaché reports, prisoner interrogations, and intercepted American radio traffic. The problem lay deeper in analysis, in culture, and in belief. At the center of this analytical failure were key figures such as Commander Minoru Genda, the brilliant architect of the Pearl Harbor attack plan, Ensign Takeno Yoshikawa, the undercover intelligence officer who gathered information in Honolulu, and Captain Toshikazu Omai, a strategist whose estimates guided Imperial Navy planning. Each of these men worked with fragments of truth, but their conclusions were shaped by a dangerous assumption that America's military system functioned like Japan's own. This fatal habit, known as mirror imaging, became the foundation of Japan's strategic misjudgment. Analysts assumed the enemy would think, act, and mobilize as they themselves would. Japan's industrial output was limited by resources and manpower, so they imagined America's would be as well. What they could not grasp was the sheer scale of American industrial capacity. The immense factories in Detroit, the shipyards in California, and the steel plants in Pittsburgh, all working around the clock to produce warships faster than Japan could count them. While Japan's Navy expanded from 120,000 to just over 300,000 men in the same period, the United States Navy exploded from 337,000 to more than 3 million personnel in the same period. The warning signs of this misjudgment appeared early. During the battles of Coral Sea, Midway, and Guadalcanal, Japanese task forces repeatedly encountered American fleets that seemed to regenerate after every loss. At Midway, Japanese intelligence expected 2 or 3 U.S. carriers, but the Americans arrived in far greater strength than predicted. At Guadalcanal, U.S. supply lines appeared endless, their manpower unbroken. Yet within Tokyo's intelligence circles, reports that contradicted pre-existing assumptions were dismissed as unreliable or quietly suppressed. Even as reality on the battlefield began to contradict their projections, analysts refused to believe that their numbers could be wrong. Inside the Japanese high command, uncomfortable truths were dangerous. Junior officers hesitated to challenge senior analysts, and institutional pride prevented open admission of error. Data that contradicted expectations was labeled untrustworthy. As one post-war analyst later wrote, Japan's intelligence failed not because it lacked information, but because it lacked imagination. Even as late as 1944, many within the Navy still believed that U.S. naval manpower could not exceed 500,000. By then, the real number was more than 6 times greater. By the end of 1943, a quiet reassessment began within Japanese Naval Intelligence Bureau. Some officers, reviewing new data, realized the magnitude of their earlier mistakes and concluded that American mobilization had surpassed every previous assumption. But those findings were never made public. They were classified, locked away in military archives, and ignored by those in power. When they finally resurfaced, Japan's fleet lay shattered, its airmen exhausted, and its empire in ruins. The war's course had already been determined by misjudgment long before the final battles were fought. The Pacific War, in many ways, was not just a battle of weapons, it was a battle of perception. Japan's greatest defeat came not at sea, but in the mind. It was the failure to see the true scale of America's power, the failure to adapt, to question, and to learn. When history remembers the Pacific War, it often recalls Pearl Harbor, Midway, and Hiroshima. But beneath those events lies a quieter, deeper lesson that wars can be lost, not by bombs or bullets, but by belief. By the end of the conflict, the United States Navy commanded more than 3.4 million personnel, the largest maritime force the world had ever seen. Japan's miscalculation had not merely underestimated an enemy, it had misread an entire civilization's capacity for war. This is not just a story of an intelligence failure. It is a timeless reminder that the most dangerous enemy in war is often the one we imagine.